Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take all that industry noise, the mergers, the policy debates, the busts, and we cut right through to what it actually means for your life out there on the road.
Yeah, and our mission today is pretty straightforward. Connect those really big macroeconomic things directly back to your paycheck, and maybe your peace of mind, too.
Definitely, because the pressure right now, it feels incredibly high, doesn't it?
It really does. And this analysis, it couldn't be more timely. You might be seeing things like global trade tariffs hitting your freight volume, or maybe it's closer to home, like state politics just, well, ignoring the roads you drive on.
Right.
Every single story we're looking at today, believe it or not, is interconnected.
Yeah.
The idea is to understand not just what happened, but why you feel that impact every time you pull into a dock or check the load board.
Exactly. And we're kind of taking a page out of the playbook from life as a trucker here, trying to look at every issue from all possible angles. Because if you're only getting one side of the story, you're really missing half the picture of what drivers are facing. So let's unpack this. Maybe start with a really crucial test case for driver respect way up north.
Alaska. Yeah, let's start there.
You might think, okay, Alaska, that's kind of a remote problem, right?
Yep.
But what happens up there, it often sets a kind of national blueprint for respect for investment
Right.
or lack thereof.
That's right. Jamie Benson, he's the president of the Alaska Trucking Association, ATA. He went straight to the lawmakers with what they're calling the big three priorities.
And what are those?
Well, what's interesting is these aren't like requests for handouts. They're really calls for basic infrastructure and safety. So number one, safety itself.
Correct.
We're talking treacherous terrain, just brutal weather conditions, roads with minimal shoulders, sometimes none. Zero room for error up there.
Wow.
Second, the workforce crisis. You've got drivers facing extreme isolation, really long hauls, and big retention issues because, frankly, the pay isn't keeping up with the risk involved.
Makes sense. And the third?
The roads. The roads themselves, the ATA calls them lifelines, and they're literally falling apart.
Falling apart how?
Frost heave, for anyone not familiar, that's this constant vicious freeze-thaw cycle. It physically tears the roadbed, the asphalt, everything apart.
So trying to handle an 80,000-pound load on that.
Almost impossible to do safely, yeah. Benson made it really clear. If these roads fail, shipments stop. We're talking fuel, food, medical supplies, everything.
So why does this matter down here in the lower 48?
Because it's precedent, right. If lawmakers in Alaska actually step up and fix this, that forces a conversation about better standards everywhere else.
But if they ignore it,
Then that neglect becomes the blueprint. It signals how other states might treat their drivers and their infrastructure needs. It's about respect, fundamentally.
okay, so Alaska highlights failures in the physical integrity of the system. But there's another side to this integrity coin, isn't there?
Absolutely. We need to shift focus to a parallel crisis, maintaining the professional integrity of the drivers. And that takes us straight to that massive bust down in Indiana.
Right. The Homeland Security investigations and Indiana State Police operation. Huge numbers.
Yeah, 223 arrests of illegal aliens. And the shocking part, 146 of them were reportedly operating commercial trucks, CMVs.
Using fraudulent CDLs and stolen identities.
Exactly. That sent, serious shockwaves through the industry. And for good reason.
It's a massive safety issue, first off. You just don't want someone driving an 80,000-pound rig next to your family if they never actually passed a legitimate CDL exam.
No way. And it completely undercuts the whole system. Think about it. Legitimate drivers, they spend thousands of dollars, countless hours, really grinding to get that CDL.
That's a serious investment.
A huge investment. And this kind of fraud, it just devalues all that effort. Plus, it puts downward pressure on wages, right?
Yeah.
Or flooding the market with illegally credentialed, frankly, cheap labor.
So this creates a real tension. We see a lot of drivers, understandably, cheering this crackdown.
Yeah.
They want to protect the system's legitimacy.
Protect their investment, protect fair competition.
But then you also hear worries, concerns about maybe over-policing, or drivers giving the side eye to carriers who seem to prioritize cheap labor over actually verifying credentials, maybe looking the other way on bad paperwork.
That's the suspicion, yeah. And here's where it gets even more complicated, believe it or not.
How so?
Some of these truckers who were arrested, the ones with the unlawful licenses, they're apparently pushing to get their CDLs reinstated.
Reinstated? On what grounds?
They're claiming they were victims, that they were tricked by, shady CDL schools or middlemen, maybe misled about their immigration paperwork or the license process itself.
Okay, but if we're talking 146 people reportedly using fraudulent licenses, stolen identities,
Yeah.
Isn't the priority just 100% enforcement, full stop?
Yeah.
How does the industry even navigate that?
It's incredibly tricky. Look, you have to acknowledge the human side. It's possible some individuals were genuinely exploited or tricked. These CDL mills can be predatory. But the risk to the entire system if this reinstatement push actually succeeds, it's immense. You'd be setting a precedent for tolerating fraud, basically telling people, oh, just say you didn't know and maybe you'll get your license back.
It devalues the legitimate CDL even further.
Totally. The consensus we're seeing from the sources is pretty clear on this. Trust has to be protected above all else.
So what does that look like practically?
Well, if individuals were tricked, the investigation needs to nail those fraudulent schools, those middlemen, hard. But for the drivers themselves, full retesting, recertification, just like every other legitimate driver has to go through. No shortcuts.
And the carriers.
The carriers. The penalties have got to fall hardest on any company that knowingly looked the other way, that hired drivers with bogus credentials just to save a buck. That's where the hammer needs to come down.
Okay, so we've talked integrity, both physical and professional. Let's shift now to money, maybe. Specifically, how these big macroeconomic forces are hitting your truck right now.
Yeah, good transition. Because TFI International, massive transportation and logistics company, they recently lowered their financial forecast.
And the reason they gave?
Tariffs. Plain and simple. They were very clear about it. New tariffs are dragging down demand. That slams freight volumes, especially the cross-border stuff between the U.S. and Canada or Mexico.
Which means less manufacturing,
Yeah.
fewer finished goods to haul, just a general cooling off.
Exactly. And for the working-class trucker, this feels like a slow bleed.
Right. When these big companies use fancy terms like adjusted guidance, what does that actually translate to on the ground? For your miles, your rates.
Well, history shows us when a giant like TFI talks about adjusted guidance because of less cross-border freight, that usually translates almost immediately to maybe a 5, maybe even a 10-cent per mile squeeze on key spot market lanes.
Ouch. That's direct.
That's the direct hit. That's the quantifiable impact of those big, abstract macroeconomic tariffs right on your paycheck. The driver eats the loss while the suits, well, they adjust their guidance.
And this kind of economic pressure, it leads straight into driver stress, doesn't it? Burnout.
Absolutely. Which brings us, actually, to the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.
All right. What's happening there?
There's a potential shift happening. For years, truckers have felt like the industry's scapegoat, Always the one getting the ticket, never really feeling protected by the system.
Heard that many times.
But Robin Duffy, the FMCSA administrator, has now confirmed the agency intends to hold shippers more accountable.
Shippers? Accountable for what?
Things like excessive driver wait times, detention pay issues, pushing drivers into hours of service violations, unsafe loading practices, basically forcing drivers to break rules to meet completely unrealistic schedules.
Wow, that would be huge. And long overdue, many would say.
Definitely long overdue. For decades, shippers could delay drivers for hours with zero consequences, push schedules that were just flat out illegal or unsafe.
So this isn't just about avoiding a ticket for the driver.
No, it's much bigger. It's about finally putting a real non-negotiable value on the driver's time and their safety. Think about the mental load that lifts. If you know the system is supposed to hold that warehouse accountable for making you sit for 3-4 hours unpaid.
It feels like the system might finally start watching the driver's back a bit more.
That's the hope. But naturally, the driver reaction is, well, it's split.
How so?
Some are celebrating. They're like, yes, finally, go after the warehouse gatekeepers.
Yeah.
Others, still deeply suspicious. They worry it's just another excuse to write more tickets, maybe aimed at drivers caught in the middle, or that enforcement will only hit the small shippers, while the mega corporations with the fancy lawyers get a pass.
That skepticism is understandable, given the history.
Very. So the best advice we found coming out of all this,
What time?
document everything. If this shift towards shipper accountability is actually going to work, drivers have to do their part. Keep meticulous records, detention hours, start and end times, shady dock practices, unsafe loads.
That evidence becomes crucial.
Absolutely essential. That's the leverage you need to use this potential change and finally get the respect, especially for your time, that you deserve.
Okay, so we've got tariffs hitting demand, potential shifts in enforcement. What about the carriers themselves? We're hearing about consolidation, too.
Yeah, another big piece of the puzzle, look at J&R Schugel, the carrier based up in Minnesota. They just merged with Interstate Personnel Services Transportation, or IPS.
And why would they do that now?
It's a pretty stark warning sign, actually. The freight market is shaky, fuel costs are all over the place, and recruiting good drivers is still incredibly difficult.
So mid-sized carriers are feeling the squeeze.
Big time. They're combining forces to survive, basically. In this deal, it looks like J&R gets access to IPS's nationwide recruiting pipeline and staffing flexibility, which they needed.
And IPS gets.
They get a legitimate, established asset fleet, J&R's trucks, and infrastructure to anchor their transportation services business. It's a synergy play born out of pressure.
So for drivers currently at J&R or maybe thinking of going there, what are the trade-offs?
Well, on the plus side, maybe you see some new lane opportunities, perhaps quicker onboarding because of IPS's system. But there's always a downside.
Like what?
Potential culture shock, definitely. Merging two different company cultures is always messy. Growing pains as they integrate systems, dispatch technology might change.
And the big one.
The big one. This kind of consolidation always puts pressure on rates and pay across the board. As fewer, bigger players control more of the market, they have more leverage.
So it's another signal that you really can't depend on just one company or even one market segment for long-term stability anymore.
Exactly. Which brings us right back to that core advice we keep seeing in our source material, especially from places like Life as a Trucker. It's about self-management.
How so?
Since the industry is just constantly churning mergers today, tariffs tomorrow, enforcement changes the day after, you absolutely need a personal shield, something to protect yourself against the inevitable ups and downs of freight rates, the economy, everything.
And that shield is
Managing your time. But not just managing it for the shipper or the carrier, managing it for yourself.
meaning.
Meaning you need to leverage that precious off-duty time wisely. Use it to learn new skills. Use it to create extra streams of income, especially recurring online income.
Okay, now we're talking building freedom, resilience.
That's exactly it. It's about dedicating some of that off-duty time, not just to resting, which is crucial, obviously, but to acquiring skills. Skills that are flexible, digital.
The source material mentioned AI. How does that fit in?
Yeah, it suggests leveraging tools, including AI, not necessarily to become a coder, but to maybe automate tasks or help build these digital income streams more efficiently. Think creating content, running simple online services, things like that.
So making money online month after month, even while you're on the road or during downtime.
Precisely. That helps you build towards retirement, maybe on your own terms, not just whenever the pension plan says so. And critically, it protects your family if, heaven forbid, your trucking company suddenly folds or the market takes a nosedive again.
Because ultimately, controlling your own income stream, having multiple streams, that's the real key to stability.
Yeah.
And feeling respected, too.
Absolutely. If the industry itself can't always provide that stability through fair rates and steady work, and lately it seems like it struggles to plan, then you have to build some of that stability yourself, outside of the cab. Hashtag tag outro.
Okay, let's try and tie this all together then. We've gone from collapsing roads up in Alaska
Physical integrity.
to federal tariffs squeezing demand, the CDL fraud crackdown,
Professional integrity.
and potential shifts in FMCSA enforcement, carrier mergers. It feels like the pressure on the driver is just constant, coming from every direction.
It really is. But importantly, we've also seen signs of solutions emerging, haven't we? Things like the crackdowns trying to protect the CDL system, the FMCSA finally acknowledging the burden shippers place on drivers. These are potential positives.
True. Small steps, maybe, but steps.
And it just reaffirms how crucial knowledge and preparedness are for every single driver listening. The smartest truckers out there, they know how to not just survive these market cycles.
They thrive.
They thrive in spite of them. Knowledge really is your armor against all this volatility and preparation. That's your shield against whatever the next market shock is going to be.
So the industry, the drivers, they're asking for roads that actually work, laws that protect them, and fundamentally a paycheck that matches the risk they take every day.
That's the core demand. Respect and fair compensation.
Now, given that these external factors, the tariffs, the mergers, they seem to always be steering that paycheck. Maybe the biggest leverage you have isn't actually on the road at all.
Interesting thought. Where is it then?
Well, maybe it's in the time you spend off the clock, building that backup plan we talked about, building those other income streams.
Controlling what you can control. Your time, your skills.
Exactly. So here's your deep dive homework for this week. What online skill are you going to start exploring or learning this week? Think about it. We'll catch you next time.